Hello everyone, today we're checking out the theme for He Who Sets Fire to the Rain, or like, Gravity to the Lightning. Yes, indeed, it's the Flappy Bird with the dental plan, Adel the Baron of Night from Elden Ring Nightreign. You guys seem really excited about this one, so I'm excited too. As per usual, we're gonna have our format in which we have an uninterrupted listening, followed by a breakdown, afterwards a little bit of lore talk, and that's gonna happen for each phase. As always, there will be chapters below for your convenience. Yeah, so I really don't know what to expect with this one, but there's only one way to find out, so without further ado, let's begin! Those bosses are rough. That's so chaotic. We still have that Dance of Night over 3. This is so dissonant. It's more textural than it is melodic or harmonic. Oh, first piece of melody. Oh, that sliding in pitch, that's nasty. So much chromaticism, it's insane. Oh, that's surprisingly melodic. Oh, that dragging down of pitch. Yeah, this one definitely stands out between the tracks, if only because it takes very long to find any level of definition. I definitely can see how it's connected to the influences that maybe helped design Adele. We're going to talk about them later, but for now, let's get to breaking this down. This track begins rather chaotically, with the strings are playing tremolando, they're playing back and forth very, very quickly with the bow. So we're not really getting a measured rhythmic movement, we're getting like a cloud of sound getting out of control. To accentuate that screeching sound, the string players are really taking the bow and playing a lot closer to the lower part of the violin rather than in the middle of the violin. That really changes the balance between how much we're hearing the scratching of the bow over the string, as opposed to hearing like the tone, the ringing of the frequencies that we're usually looking for when we want to hear the notes. It really helps adding this layer of noise, of air, of tension into the regular sound. Check it out again. It's very nasty from the very beginning. It's off-putting, it's aggressive. It's a lot like the introduction of Adele. You can say what you will, but graceful it is not. Definitely looks like somebody's been chasing pavements. And so after this rise in the strings, we're getting this tribal, slow, dramatic percussion statement. Now, if this percussive statement would just repeat again and again, what we're going to have is something that gets pretty old pretty fast. So for our listeners to be able to take in the gravity of the moment, gravity, there has to be an in-between point in which we get to kind of digest it. It's an entirely different matter if somebody gets into a room, releases a single shout, and then there's silence in the room. Or if they're going into the room and just start yelling over and over and over and over, it's gonna get pretty old pretty quick. it does not have gravitas. Meanwhile, the strings keep playing that tremolando. They're keeping playing on that back and forth, that nervous texture. And so throughout this beginning, almost until the half point of this track, we have something that's a lot more textural than it is tonal, melodic, or harmonic. Adele's appearance and the introduction is horrifying. It's really pushing us to understand how damaging and dangerous the night is. And so they begin with overwhelming you and then giving you a second to understand how overwhelmed you are. Yeah, let's continue. So here the strings do begin to play something beyond that texture we mentioned. But still, it's more of a gesture. It's not yet a distinct melody. It's a movement in a direction. Now, to support that feeling of horror, both the strings and, I think, synthesizers within this, joined of course by the choir, are dragging the pitch down at the end of every long note they're holding. This is a really strong way of depicting how the night corrupted Adele. And I very much mean corrupting them inside and out. Also, when you have this dragging down of the pitch towards the end, it feels like the gravity is being adjusted mid-sentence. Basically like Goku going full trigger happy and ADHD on that controller of the gravity in the spaceship on his way to Namek. And just like Goku, we get the impression that Adele isn't the brightest, but that doesn't matter, he's dangerous. Everything about this opening screams horror. It screams run. This is very much an apex predator out of control, and the music is depicting it beautifully. Let's continue. Oh. The brass are dragging down as well. This is so defragmented. One moment you have the choir saying something, one moment you have a single note from the strings. It is not very musically legible. Whether we're musicians or not, the instrument that we have the most familiarity with is our voice. Our voice is for the most part monophonic, and therefore we do perceive a lot of our understanding of music either through rhythm or melody. Now the rhythm is very clear here, but melody-wise, it begins something and it never ends it. It takes your attention, it says, hey, look over there, something is about to start, but it never actually starts. It's a spark, a small explosion. We keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. This, to a degree, will make us feel lost. It would make us feel on edge, especially since a lot of the bosses in Nightreign are fairly melodic in comparison to this. Now, of course, you have your exceptions, but this definitely feels a lot less organized in everything related to melody. The fact that there is no legible melody makes us feel that there is nothing human we can glean within that character. They're completely lost, not to madness, but to hunger. So whether it's starvation or gluttony, the being that was once there is no more. What we have is a degenerative form of what it used to be, and the damage that is left in its wake. Ta 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 ta. That's the line that we have in the brass section. Now there are other notes moving with it. It's harmonized, but it's all moving together. It's the closest thing we've had to a melody so far. They're teasing us farther, but they're not going to present enough repetition for us to be able to hold on to it. As we mentioned before, the two most powerful forces in music are repetition and variation. They are truly the yin and yang of music. They're not contradictory forces who are trying to defeat each other, they are complementary forces, the balance between which is the thing to focus on. How much do you have of each? Now, since there is less repetition over this melody, it doesn't give us the confidence that this is a line to follow. It's going to be followed by a line in the strings, and again, they're throwing us around. Yeah, the sparks that we have to look at are getting a little bit longer, because if those sparks would remain as short as they were before, our brain would just tune them out. Again, it's like a rubber band, and they're stretching it and they're releasing it. The idea of tension and release. To keep the tension up, we have to keep the variation going. And now we're going to have a descending chromatic line in the violins, which again is more of a gesture, a direction, than it is a melodic line we can hold on to. At the end here, it's like, oh, this is behaving more like a melody. It's not just a descending texture. But again, none of it is, let's say, legible on a first listening. It's not supposed to be. It's not built to be memorable melodically. It's built to be memorable experientially. Basically, as a holistic experience with the fight itself. Listening to these tracks on their own can be very enjoyable, but it's important to remember these tracks were created as a part of a larger piece of art. We can't really separate what these tracks are from the very aggressive and unstoppable movement of the powerhouse that is Adel. The sound effects and the animations are just as important of a rhythmic element as the music is in that case. So let's just keep it in mind, although this is a musical deep dive, so we will stick to the music for this one. That dragging down of the pitch in the brass. Okay, now, finally, we have an idea that we can hold on to. This is a development on the motif we heard in the brass. In the brass, we had ta-dee-ta-da. Now, ta-dee-da-da-da. This is a much more legible melody than we've had before. It is in a higher range, it's more memorable, it has contrasting directions, it's played not as a cloud of sound, but as a distinct melody. Now, I'm not expecting it to repeat a million times, but it is giving us a bit more focus. They have to give us something, just enough breadcrumbs so we keep following the trail. This is a crafty move, since they gave us something recognizable, ta-dee-da-da-da, they have to slap you in the face with something unexpected. So harmonically, the whole thing shifts to something that is definitely not of the same scale as what we've had before. Up until now, we could feel that all of this is more textural than harmonic, but now we have something that contradicts harmonically the melody that we've had. By that I mean the notes that appear in the melody are directly contradictory to the notes that appear in the chord right after it. This is an intentional contrast and shift. Before, we had the gravitational shift represented by the dragging down of the pitch. Now, we have a different form of musical gravity that's shifting, which is tonality. A way of looking at musical tonality is looking at a certain note as a center of gravity. The other notes are trying to either go up to it or go down to it. For example, let's take the scale of C major. We have our center of gravity, the home tone, C. Any other note that we have either wants to eventually be dragged down and reach that C, or in particular cases, climb up. For example, C. If I go to D, you will see it has this gravitational pull downwards. Same with E. If I jump from C to F, you can still feel that gravity pulling you down. Now, the place in which things change a little bit is when we go a bit higher than that. We go from C to G, for example. G is our dominant note. It's as far from home as you can get. In a way, it makes the heart grow fonder of home. It makes you miss home all the more. On the other hand, you are very far from home. You can't immediately reach it. In which case, G would try to either descend down back to C, or it would try to go up to C. Let's see what happens when it goes up. So from here, everything after G is moving again to the C above it, gravitationally. Now, everything we talked about moved around the note of C. It was the center of gravity, like a planet that has a center. What they're doing here is bring another big planet and having it affect the gravitational force of the first one, just like Earth having its own axis. But then you have the realization it is bound by the gravitational forces of the sun. It's such a cool way to subvert the expectation, giving you this moment of, oh, I finally know what's going on. Nope. No, you don't. So cool. Let's check that moment again and then we'll continue. We're right back to those chromatic movements, those gestures instead of melodies. Ta-ra-ra-ra. The brass are moving up in steps and the strings are descending in steps. Contrary motion is a very powerful tool in music composition. And here, because it's divided between the sections of the orchestra, it really confuses you. Which one of these is the primary focus I should be looking at? None of them is yet developing into a melodic idea that your brain can latch onto. Now the strings are keeping that harsh sound that we talked about, moving the bow closer to the lower part of the violin. Also, on top of all of this chromaticism, the strings are actually giving us another little breadcrumb. P-da-da-da. Something that feels both sinister and ancient. Oh, now they're giving us something to work with. This is much more recognizable. This is a much more distinct melodic movement in this dance of night. But beforehand, I do want to direct your attention to something interesting that's happening here. The sound of both the brass and the strings is being artificially manipulated, both through playing techniques but also through sound design. The sound is being affected by pitch shifting, by manipulating the frequencies, by distorting the sound. All of these, when combined with the visuals of Adel, scream corruption. The developers want you to know not only that this is currently a monster, this is a monster that was made by corrupting something that prior was natural, beautiful, majestic even. Which is brilliant. So yeah, let's check out this melody that we got here, which again is a lot more legible than what we've had before. This little echo of what Adele used to be, but still completely corrupted by the night. as if it's saying, yeah, even that little bit that was left of what you used to be, that now follows the night. Once again, we see an example of the loss of the persona. This will be very interesting to dig into between the tracks. Da da dee da da. It's such a beautiful, desperate melody. It leaps upwards only to try and cling to something, but at the end, it succumbs to corruption. It succumbs to gravity. Just like Adele can no longer fly properly. Think of how similar this movement is to Adele trying to pick up momentum and actually fly, only to crash down. Gravity pull. Oh, that's so nice. And at the end, we have that solo violin, that intimate sound we talked about, that's very unique to how this game handles its soundtrack. Again, we cannot fully feel the tragedy of what Adele has become without occasionally seeing a glimpse of what it used to be, which is fascinating to discuss and also a great timing because it's Laura Clock. So let's begin our discussion with the description of the Gaping Jaw expedition. A colossal, crooked black frame capable of harboring lightning, with massive jaws lined with grinding teeth to devour anything and everything it encounters. Only poison will stop it in its tracks. This is a very raw physical description of Adele, describing its shape as a colossal, crooked black frame. Now, the fact it's crooked means it had an original shape, or at least an intended shape. This is probably not remotely what Adele looked like before the night. Now, this black frame is described as being capable of harboring lightning. In From Software games, lightning has always been connected to the dragons. They both seem to wield it and to be weak to it pretty consistently. In which case it looks like lightning is a weapon that they developed to fight each other to begin with, just like humans developed weapons to fight each other. But something is unusual about Adele's lightning. It is purple. Occasionally in the base game we'd encounter something that is called gravity magic. Think about the Alabaster Lords, Radahn for example. But calling it lightning in particular and having it be purple is different. We always see it as an expression of excess energy from gravity magic. Here, it's proper lightning, gravity lightning. Now, it is important to mention that what Elden Ring refers to as gravity magic actually holds the symbol for magnetism. To horribly simplify it, gravity has a singular point of attraction when we're talking about a certain object, while magnets have two poles. It definitely makes sense that in the world of Elden Ring, even something like gravity is going to have an element of duality within it. In which case, what would be gravity for us is actually magnetism for the world of Elden Ring. So if that purple lightning is sometimes showing as excess energy made from magnetism magic, what could it tell us about Adele? Being able to harbor that lightning means you're able to contain a ridiculous amount of energy, being able to maintain it. Now, it's not like Adele is holding it in a box, it's running through its body. That's extremely destructive. All of that energy non-stop running through the body, absolutely destroying it. Now, this already makes me think about a few inspirations that could have contributed to the design of Adele, but let's give it another minute because we should finish this item description first. Or expedition description. So Adele is described as a colossal crooked black frame, supporting the idea that there's nothing there anymore. Whatever personality or soul was there to begin with is long gone, it's just a frame. Leading us to the other most noticeable element of Adele's design, with massive jaws lined with grinding teeth to devour anything and everything it encounters. Now, it can be tempting when you're making a monster design to just make it deformed and scary. And we could say, yeah, the artists kind of rolled the dice and it ended up on oops, all molars. But I think in this case, it implies kind of an evolution that Adel went through. To be able to devour anything and everything, he developed those unnatural, grinding teeth. Now, for the last point here, only poison will stop it in its tracks. I wonder why that is. On the devouring side of things, I can imagine that poison would make you maybe vomit. It would make you bring something out instead of taking it in, and maybe that constant devouring is the thing that makes Adel powerful. It's like a never-ending momentum. If you stop devouring, you will stop existing. And so that poison is basically doing the opposite reaction of what Adel needs to do to survive, therefore they're weak to poison. Another option could be a testament to the physical corruption of the knight and how damaging it was to Adel, being extremely vulnerable to external corruption, something that comes from the outside and then ruins you from within. I definitely think it's a reasonable explanation. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Now let's check out the item description for the Knight of the Baron. After going over this one, I feel like we'll be able to further explore different influences that I think affected the design of Adel. The knight belonging to Adel, left upon his defeat. The power of its namesake can be unlocked by performing a relic rite. The dragon was nothing less than a wonder of the natural world, majestic in size and bearing. It was the apex predator of the old island upon which it roosted. But when the sky began to weep in hues of azure, all was lost. There was nothing more left to feed upon, leaving only hunger, which grew into madness, a ravening, unending. So here we have a confirmation that Adel is male, since the item says, left upon his defeat. Now we see something I've been hinting at throughout the first phase. The story and the design of Adel holds a lot of elements of falling from grace. The dragon was nothing less than a wonder of the natural world. That is such a harsh contrast with the design that we are faced with in that battle. The text is painting a version of Adel that's so far removed from what we meet that it activates our imagination to understand what could have possibly been before. Now, it says majestic in size and bearing. Size is pretty self-explanatory, but what do you mean bearing? Here we have a description of regal behavior. A ruling class dragon. Beautiful, majestic. Basically dragon aristocracy. That's why not only is he titled Baron of Night, which is a noble title. This spelling of the word Adel shows that the origin of the name is from High German, a word meaning noble. And so the name Baron of Night really is mocking what he used to be, which really makes me think about all of the elements of corruption we've seen throughout the music of the first phase. The corruption of acoustic instruments through sound design, the bending of pitch through gravity, the sharp shift in gravitational center when it comes to the tonality. All of it screaming unnatural corruption. Now here it's confirmed, Adel was the apex predator of the old island upon which it roosted. He was the peak of the hierarchy, but what was left of the peak of the hierarchy when there was nothing left to eat because of the night? There is a theme here of what the night does to the hierarchies that exist in the world. It also has a pattern of turning aristocracy into mindless murderers, something presented very clearly in Revenant's questline. So what happens to a king when you topple everything that feeds him? They become as depraved as the lowest of the low in the hierarchies they used to command. This contrast of natural and unnatural, treating the night as a natural disaster but seeing the unnatural effects it has over everything it touches. I think it's a fascinating concept to explore, and it makes me think about a piece of literature that may have some connections to the design of Adel. This tragic fall from grace, both in story and design, very much reminds me of Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is an epic poem by English poet John Milton. This poem concerns not only the original sin of man, the fall from grace of the relationship between man and God, which is also instigated by devouring, by eating the apple. Not only that, it also concerns the fall from grace that led to that moment. Speaking, of course, about the fall from grace of none other than Lucifer Morningstar. Now, the poem describes Lucifer's fall from grace as something that was driven by various forms of sin. Envy, gluttonous ambition. Now, normally, I wouldn't necessarily think about it. Yeah, it has the element of fall from grace, but a lot of stories have that. But I have a couple more reasons why I think this poem in particular was influential in the creation of Adel. Beyond Lucifer being originally a noble angel, the natural world, the island that Adel lived in, at least to him, is very much described as a paradise. Now, it's true that we're not getting a lot of information on that island, but it's sandwiched between two descriptions that are very important. One, how Adel is a wonder of the natural world, majestic, right? That kind of binds Adel and the world together. It's hard to imagine Adel being a majestic being in an absolute desolate space. On the other hand, we do have a description of what happened after the night hit the island. Then it was desolate. There was nothing left to eat. Now that is one form of paradise lost. But wait, there's more. In this poem, John Milton describes fallen angels in a very particular way. He describes them as burnt and deformed, as if charred by lightning. The reason Adel looks like that is because he's holding that lightning in. That containing of the lightning is breaking his body apart, charring him like a fallen angel. The fact that the text in the game is calling Adel a dragon was always weird for me because Adel doesn't look like any regular dragon we see in the game. Now you can say he's a completely different breed of dragon, but I think there's a bit more here. Because in Paradise Lost, it is described how Lucifer, after his fall from grace, took the shape of a serpent, tempting Eve to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the apple. Now, when we're thinking about serpents, that gaping jaw makes a lot more sense. They can open their jaw pretty damn wide to eat and devour whatever it is that decide to eat. And it always looks gluttonous. They eat things so much larger than they are. Now, if we compare it to the design of the Gaping Dragon from Dark Souls 1, who also has a cameo in the game, it's true that the Gaping Dragon was an ancient dragon corrupted from within, but it definitely is built a lot more like a dragon than Adel is, which I think is due to the damage of that lightning. Another fun thing is when the Gaping Dragon is introduced in Dark Souls 1, we see his snout first, which looks just a little bit like a peaking serpent. So I think it's reasonable to consider Paradise Lost by John Milton as an influential piece since it's very well known, and I do think it echoes so strongly, both in the soundtrack, in how the corruption is dragging down like a fallen angel, taking the pitch down, right? How it's described in the soundtrack and in the text and in the character design, which is just so cool. I also think Adel potentially points us in the direction of the God of Night, which we're going to talk about after we break down Phase 2. So, without further ado, an uninterrupted listening of Phase 2 of Adel, Baron of Night. Oh, that throat singing! Synth drum. Oh, that synthesizer is growing a lot more dominant. so much more dissonant than it was. Just a bit of melody. Oh, what was that? This definitely had a touch of Holster's in it. Like a touch of Holster's theme. This is much more consistently dissonant than what we had in Phase 1. And that rage really has significantly less contrast as a result. It's just a non-stop pressure. Okay, interesting. Let's break it down. From the very beginning, we have an unclear melodic line. It's not easy to remember, it's not easy to follow. It is, by all means, behaving as if it's atonal. By that I mean it avoids having a clear center of gravity. It's pulling in all direction, but unlike Libra, that was more like hectic, here they are forcefully pulling in all directions like magnetism within Adel is pulling his body in all directions, like absolutely tearing him apart.
You're tearing me apart, Lisa!
Now, in addition to that, we have throat singing, which is a form of vocal performance that emphasizes certain frequencies in the voice. It takes a lot of control to do, and it's an unusual sound for this soundtrack. Kind of a human didgeridoo kind of a sound. Makes it feel unnatural. Now, in addition to all of that, there's a much more prominent focus on the synthesizer here. Now, whether it represents magnetism, gravity, the corruption of the night, it doesn't really matter because it is absolutely destroying Adele from within. This aggressive use of synthesizers is part of what made the demonic energy in Mick Gordon's soundtrack for Doom 2016 feel like something that is uncontrollable, something that is corrupted, something that could not be handled by any physical element that we're familiar with. Hence, it's represented by a synthesizer, a deforming of a sound wave, the taking of pure energy, and the manipulation of it into a shape it wasn't originally in. It's so raw and aggressive and threatening. Yeah, I love it. So much dissonance. The sopranos of the choir are coming in, but they are not very front and center like they usually are in this type of boss tracks. It's really sitting behind like a wall of distortion, something that kind of prevents you from seeing them as they are. Kind of an uncanny valley feeling you're getting from these vocals. It's the malformed shape of the fallen angel as it's being charred by lightning. So effective. I love it. That's such a cool moment, and again, the synthesizer is absolutely crucial in making that movement. It's not as possible to make just with acoustic instruments. The sound design and the synthesizer are very important here because we have a very smooth glide of pitch from a pretty high to a pretty low place. And that drop, it is a physical fall from grace. Again, that gravity pulling downwards, so effective. Wait, I gotta hear it again. Whoa. Now it comes to me that when the strings took their bow closer to the bridge of the violin, it creates a pretty similar effect to what throat singing does to us. It changes the color of the sound production. It's called the formant. So I can sing the same pitch, but if I change the vowel, you can see that the color of the sound changes. The color of the sound, the formant, changes, even though the pitch didn't. So that thing that was done with the strings earlier by moving the bow closer to the bridge, the throat singing is doing that with the vocals, which is very, very cool. You also have a blurring of the lines between the brass and the synthesizers, because the brass can also do that kind of formant change, making the sound thinner and more piercing. But occasionally you hear things here that couldn't be possibly created with brass alone. A synthesizer had to come in and manipulate things by force. That's such a cool development. Listen how nasty, how full of malice it is. Now, here we also have some kind of variation on the theme of night. So here we have this also goes to show how powerful orchestration can be. Not only writing for an orchestra, but the choice of which instruments play that line that you wrote. It completely changes our perception of scale, of aggression, of intent. For example, the theme from Hallownest, from Hollow Knight, is dealing with a pretty similar melodic structure, but because it's played so softly with the piano, you're not going to confuse the two. It's so different. Also, here we have a more legible melody, because honestly, at some point, they gotta give you something. It's something that Bane says in The Dark Knight Rises. It's also in Amnesia: The Dark Descent, how within torture, you got to give them hope. They have to have a sliver of hope so it's effective. Otherwise, then you just disassociate, you tune out. You have no reason to stay conscious. Again, it's a very strategic form of stretching that rubber band, enriching complexity, and then using release as a form to empower the upcoming tension. This is such an effective dramatic line. This kind of both leaping and stepping movement. And it's all emphasizing not only dissonant notes and jumps, it's also emphasizing weak beats. It really helps destabilize how you feel when you fight that boss. There's absolutely distortion on those brass. Like, they're also, don't get me wrong, they're also overblowing their instruments, so they create natural distortion. But there are sound design effects on top of the instruments. It evokes a level of aggression that those instruments wouldn't be naturally capable of, which, again, is so thematically appropriate. The rhythm is pretty consistent. So it's not, like something that's completely throwing you off, like the changes of the time signature in Folgore's theme. No, here what we have is a pretty consistent rhythm, but the direction of the music, it can't make up its mind. It is kind of this ravenous urge of Adel. That's very effective and also necessary. If we kept the same level of loudness throughout the whole thing, it would be so difficult to listen to. It wouldn't be a pleasant musical experience, even as a dissonant thing, because again, we need the change, we need the variation. I think we've mentioned it before on this soundtrack, but the forte, the so strong dynamics, the loud and brazen dynamics, that is kind of a concrete ceiling. You can't really go much farther than that, and you can't stay there very long because you can't rise when you're on top. And the thing we react to emotionally isn't being on top of the dynamics, but rising in the dynamics. Now, so you can rise, you have to sometimes make a drop. Those instruments have a physical limit for how aggressive they can get. And so this little dip does so much in making you feel like the dynamic actually grew. It went farther. Not because it's objectively louder than it was, let's say, 15 seconds ago, but because it is relatively louder to what happened 2 seconds ago. Very clever use of dynamics. I love it. It also thins out the frequency range quite a bit. It's leaving within the orchestration just the vocals there for a second. Reduction is often far more effective than addition, and that reduction allows me to re-add the different areas of my music based on like high and low, the brass, the strings, everything that is an element within the music. I can now gradually bring it back, contributing to the rise, because the rise is more important than being at that high floor. Oh, so good. Okay, so we have the brass playing the melody here with the violin when the violins are playing high, like dangerously high. That is writing that you're not going to see, or at least you shouldn't see, unless you're working with very, very, very capable string players. And even then, that is like they're playing high. That's the higher you go in the violin, right, over the neck, the higher you go, the more difficult pitch control becomes. That's why I'm saying that this writing is dangerous, because it's very easy to fall out of pitch. Here, they are hitting it so well. It's so difficult to get accurately. And the fact that the brass are doing it in one octave and the strings are doing it above, that's like an escalation like no other. Also, it has a bit of a variation on the Night Lord's motif again, which is always nice to have in these bosses. It kind of ties them together whenever you see that. Yeah, it's really so wild. It's absolutely wild. Listen to that line. Da da dee da da. The violins are screeching that sound. Also, that slide in pitch, instead of just going to the next note, it's da da dee ya. It's really just that gravity is non-stop. It's amazing. That's what happens when you got a good concept and you just run with it. Da dee da da. Another fragment from Hail Source theme. Very, very cool. So here towards the end of the track, they're really like kicking up the level of dissonance, so you feel the stress coming up. Now you have the vocals singing here, they're chanting, and the strings are kind of doing that glissando, that dragging down of the pitch. Ew! They're doing that from the top. Again, very easy to make something like that sound comical. So the musical context is extremely important around this thing. The combination between the vocal, the percussion, and the strings here, they're not exactly talking with one another, they're happening in parallel. Yeah, that's absolutely stunning. I can feel how Adele is raging with that ravenous fervor. It's amazing. And speaking of that rage in particular, that brings me to some unhinged speculation when it comes to some mythological influences that I hinted at back in Folgor's video. It was always a little odd to me that we have two dragons in Nightreign that are both Night Lords, and they're very different design-wise, but again, we have two dragons. We got a centaur. I mean, I bet we could get some more variety if we needed it. And it made me think about why would we choose to include two dragons and what could be the difference between them. Now, something that is very evident both in the soundtrack and the lore is that Caligo is much more distant and calm than Adele is. That got me to think about a Mesopotamian mythological character named Tiamat. Tiamat, often described as a dragon, is the mother of all monsters. While her not being a monster herself, she is a deity. There's a whole story there about how her and her husband had a falling out because the husband wanted to kill their children and she wasn't too into that idea. So she got him first. Something interesting about her, she is known to create storms. Now, the reason why I find Tiamat interesting in that regard is that she was said to give birth to 11 monsters, and some of them are, let's call it, of note. Among those beasts are a venomous horned serpent, a great dragon, an exalted serpent that is described as a seven-headed serpent or a hydra, a furious snake dragon. Yes, there is a difference between a dragon and a raging dragon. That's interesting. A hairy beast man, little Libra-esque if you ask me. Big weather beast or lion-headed storm demon. That actually gives me Shadow of the Erdtree vibes, thinking about that. We have, in addition to that, a mad lion, which is separate from the big weather beast that's lion-headed, a scorpion man, the personification of violent storms, a fish man or a merman, a little bit Godwin-y if you ask me, and a bull man. What is interesting is the distinction between a great dragon, which Caligo definitely is because she is far larger than Adele is, and a furious snake dragon. Not only are we talking about a raging dragon as a distinctive beast separate from the great dragon, we're talking about something called a furious snake dragon, which could explain the gaping jaw and definitely connects to the whole idea of Paradise Lost with Lucifer being the serpent. That's a pretty cool thing, but I think it goes deeper. You see, I mentioned in the Folgore video how the gods of Folgore managed to hide themselves in the roaring of the thunder. Some of you even brought up in the comments, we actually see that as a skill from Placidusax. And we do know that Placidusax's god has fled. If we think about the fact that a god is usually a female counterpart to the Lord, at least for the most part, even though they are a rebus. But I think it's without a doubt that a god is usually more feminine-oriented than the Lord is. So what if Placidusax is god? What if she is also, like Placidusax, a dragon? One that fled is hiding in the roaring of the thunder. and is secretly affecting the different calamities related to the night. Because maybe it's not only that the god of night does not require exclusive loyalty from Folgore, maybe it's because Folgore's god is that god of night, hiding themselves in thunder. That depiction we also see of the god of night beyond a kind of a masking mist. So what if that god of night is Placidus Axe's fled god, or essentially Tiamat? Now, this could go a lot of different directions, and I do think as an inspiration, it is a very cool consideration to have. I guess we'll have to wait and see if we'll get a bullman, a fishman, a hydra, or a lion of some sort with the DLC bosses of the Night Lords. It's also worth mentioning that the dancing lion from the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC has control over lightning and ice storms, in addition to his third elemental state. But the fact that it is a lion-headed storm demon, I mean, that could be directly connected to that god. If we assume that the age of the horn scent, or at least their society, was more polytheistic, which gives more credence to America being the one true God, being kind of a new thing, right? It's kind of a more Christo-Judean concept in contrast to the more polytheistic religions of the time. It's something to keep in mind. The music theme for the Dancing Lion from the DLC is also a dance that's based on that, like 6/8, much like the other Night Lords that we've seen so far. That could also be a reach of Tiamat's influence. By the way, if you got all the way here through my rambling, you're probably as crazy as I am, which means there is only one cure I can suggest for that melody, and that is hitting the bell. Hitting the bell is the only cure for that god-forsaking condition called curiosity. So, I guess it's time to head directly into the third phase. Oh, the sound design here is nuts! Oh, I don't remember this at all. We're no longer dancing. This is orchestral dubstep? Distortion. Wait, what? That was a bit of Caligos thing. Electric guitars. So, Shooketh is what I am right now. I don't remember this phase going this hard. So, this is the culmination of everything we talked about. Everything we have noticed along the way, and everything that we theorized, it's coming to an absolute explosion in this. It's going to its illogical extreme. let's break it down. It's so cool. It begins with aggressive sound design, aggressive to the point in which it's not a combination of acoustic and sound design. It is sound design corrupting by force some sort of semblance of acoustic origin, right? But it doesn't stay that way. Really, we can hear Adele being corrupted in real time. That's crazy. That's so much distortion. That is uncharacteristic. Like, the distortion is now the leading instrument of the track. That is so powerful. That is giving the corruption a life of its own in this boss fight, because it is, by all means, operating the frame that is Adele. Like, Adele is gone. There's some dragon DNA in there, but that's about it. It's being puppeteered by, well, ravening unending. That's crazy. And that filthy trick of having a moment of respite before an explosion, it just makes it so much more powerful. Like, if it would start immediately, we're not gonna feel that sharp incline. Okay, like we talked about today about the dynamics and about how the incline is what we care about, not necessarily being in the loud place. Also, my previous mentioning of Mick Gordon's soundtrack for Doom 2016 is extremely appropriate here. I didn't even know. It is a very, very aggressive, distorted sound for both the synth, electric guitars that are entering here, and that type of corruption of the acoustic, basically, distorting them beyond recognition. We also have like this unnatural fluttering. This is not a natural dynamic envelope of an instrument. This is like a boop, 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 boop. It is artificial. It cannot be done in regular means. It needs to be bent by force. That's so powerful. That's such good sound design. We are now leaving the dance behind us. There is no dance. There is just like mindless marching and chomping and eating. Yeah, all that's left is hunger. Chomp chomp, munch munch, gobble gobble, gulp. And if you got that reference, put it in the comments below. So yeah, that stomping and that like just mindless marching for that hunger, that's amazing. That movement is so dubstep in its nature. It's like it's so aggressive. It is malforming the orchestra. I absolutely love it. That is also a very good way to throw you off. Basically, the drums just don't enter where they're supposed to on the strong beat. They're just like, okay, let's leave just the vocals there and bring the drums in, the percussion. It's at some weird spot that isn't really an emphasis either. It's mindless. It is beyond understanding. It's wearing the skin of Adele, but Adele is gone. That's so cool. Emphasis on the offbeat. Here we have the sound of an electric guitar basically driven to the brink, pardon the pun, but absolutely driven at very high gain into the amp, which basically floods the amp. Distortion means I am pushing more power into a capacitor that it can handle. Now, think about that, right? The idea of overflooding something with energy so it begins bending. Does that sound like anything related to the character we're talking about? The audio effect that is distortion. The reason it's distorting the wave, it's because we're pushing it beyond its physical capacity. And that's what's happening right now with Adele holding that lightning. The frame is capable of holding that lightning. It's absolutely destroying the thing it's containing. It's malforming Adele for it. That's so wise to use as a concept, and they've been building to it gradually throughout all of the phases. This is brilliant writing and production. I'm so impressed. I never expected it to go this hard. Really a small memory of the knight being in there, but even the knight isn't dominant here anymore. Just its corruption incarnate. This sounds like somebody took a part of Caligo's theme, that ta da 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 dee da, that part, but then somebody's just like scratching it out and making it, like setting it on fire. I think definitely corresponds with that idea we talked about of the distinction between dragons and raging dragons. Basically, getting the concept that once Adele was a graceful, majestic dragon, like Caligo still very much is, but now the corruption is driving its every decision and movement. It's so cool. Oh. Da, da, da. This portion, I'm pretty sure it's, if not exact same, very, very similar to something that's happened in the same phase of Caligo as the other portion we just heard. Just seeing how that aggression, how that hunger is absolutely deforming that once amazing dragon. So cool. Now we have kind of this condensing of that idea that we had before at the first phase of like a statement from the choir and then giving it a moment to breathe, or a statement from the percussion giving it a moment to breathe. Here we have it like for a beat, right? We have for a beat the percussion can hit and everything goes out. Just a small break. The brass, the electric guitars, and the synthesizers all are dragging down their pitch, just letting that gravity absolutely demolish anything that could possibly be left of Adele at this point. I absolutely adore the development along these three phases. They're so well tied together. They are so well connected to one another. I think it's doing something unique for this soundtrack with the way it's developing certain elements over time and really letting them change the form of the most dominant element of the track. I did not remember it going this hard when I was playing the game. This deserves a lot more respect and justice than the game can do alone. Like, this is one of these cases in which I'm so happy that we're getting the soundtrack released separately from the game, because yeah, we mentioned before it was built to be a part of the game, and in the game you have considerations that have to come first. Sound design and sound effects in the game, they have to come first because they're informational for the players. So music has to take somewhat of a technical backseat. But here, since we get it as an album, we get to appreciate how thoughtful, how absolutely masterful the connection between the concept and the execution is. Absolutely amazing. That's bonkers. I hope you enjoyed this one. We have 2 more Night Lords to go, the order of which I'm pretty sure is going to be first Maris and then Triple Doggo, Tricephalus. After that, well, we're gonna have new and exciting things coming. Also, I'd love to hear what you guys think about the track, the analysis. Like, talk to me. I read all of your comments. Hydrate, stretch, take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one.